Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and this episode is produced for Forbes, where I'm a contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. Today, we have some extraordinary guests with us. We have with us Brent Tippen of Chevron and Charles Best, the CEO of DonorsChoose. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Devin, for having us.
Well, we're excited to talk about this great Fuel Your School program. Why don't you take a minute, Brent, and just tell us a little bit about the program and Chevron's motivation for funding schools?
No, absolutely, and thanks for asking that question. Chevron has been hosting the Fuel Your School program for the last 5 years in partnership with DonorsChoose.org. And very simply, how the program works is starting September 1, teachers post projects on DonorsChoose.org for things that they need in their classrooms in 22 markets across the United States. And that's anything from science materials to math materials, engineering, science, any of it. And starting October 1, consumers can fill up at local Chevron and Texaco retail stations, and $1 for every 8+ gallons goes to support those projects through DonorsChoose.org. And this year, the program runs at about $8.6 million, which is a part of a much larger investment that's totaled over $140 million since 2010 in the United States in STEM education alone.
It's really exciting to see that scale of investment, and so I certainly commend you for that. Charles, tell us a little bit about how this money works, because clearly you're running a crowdfunding site, so a lot of the money traditionally that hits DonorsChoose is coming in from all kinds of people, all kinds of circumstances who are donating $5, $20, $100 to support a teacher with a project. How is the Chevron money getting funneled in?
Well, Devin, you're right to point out that DonorsChoose.org began years before crowdfunding was a word, on this idea that someone with $10 could be a full-fledged philanthropist if they were able to look through specific projects that teachers had created. I was a teacher at the time, and I figured that there were people out there who'd want to help teachers like us if they could see exactly where their money was going. And then as the years went on, what we discovered was that companies and foundations and major philanthropists can actually use our site to have a local impact across the country. Chevron is actually the single most important, the single most generous of all of those partners, which range from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to Google. And Chevron has supported more teachers, more students, more projects than any other institution. And it's primarily through this Fuel Your School program.
That's really exciting. So again, help us to think through the mechanics. You have a teacher in Tupelo, Mississippi, that is sitting there waiting for money. How does the Chevron money get to her?
That's right. Well, so this teacher in Tupelo, Mississippi has an idea for a science experiment, a field trip, a set of books that will really bring learning to life in her classroom. So she goes to DonorsChoose.org, she writes a few paragraphs about this learning experience that she wants for her kids. She identifies the specific pair of microscopes, the specific set of books that she needs for that learning experience to come to life. At DonorsChoose.org, we vet and validate each teacher's project, then it's up on our site, and starting in October, everyone who fills up at a participating Chevron or Texaco station in that teacher's community unlocks $1 for that teacher's project and other projects like it in that very community. And what I think is next generation about Fuel Your School is that it's finally a cause campaign where consumers can see their dollars at work and verify that in their own backyard, in their own communities' public school classrooms, real impact is being made, which they can track down to the dollar, down to the item, down to the book and the microscope.
Wow. So if a Chevron customer wants then, so a Tupelo, Mississippi Chevron customer wants to then she can also go on DonorsChoose, find the same teacher, and make a donation, right?
That's exactly right, and a lot of consumers may be inspired to do that, because when you go to Fuel Your School, you can see a map showing the projects that Chevron has brought to life through Fuel Your School, and I think that that's inspiring to a lot of consumers out there who then want to say, all right, well, now I'm gonna pick a project myself and pile on, and so it's absolutely a launching pad for what we call citizen philanthropists to find projects that speak to them personally.
Brent, tell us a little bit about why this is so important to Chevron. I want to drill down on the underlying real reasons that of all the things you could be doing in the world, that you've chosen education.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Devin, education is a center and a backbone of our future workforce, not only at Chevron, but across the nation. And we depend on an educated workforce to continue allowing America to thrive in a global economy. And so for us, we are looking at some point to hire the next generation geologists, the next generation biologists. A lot of the folks who are focusing on STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, and math, we hire some of the best and the brightest in the world. And we start this process early on in funding K through 12 STEM projects, getting students interested in learning fields, getting students excited about science, technology, engineering, and math, with the idea that they will continue those studies through higher education, building a pipeline into the workforce. For us, this year alone, we will surpass over $45 million in funding around STEM education in the United States alone, which has totaled over $140 million since 2010. So those figures are very real investments for us, with the idea that we want to make sure that the future workforce is prepared to enter the workforce. And Fuel Your School is one project where we're able to bring those materials directly into the classroom and put materials in teachers' hands that they may not have access to.
Yeah, it really is dramatic, and I love the technology. I think it's so exciting to be able to think about someone filling up their gas tank in Tupelo and having a teacher in Tupelo get $1 that day. I mean, that just really is a powerful technology that really localizes the activity in a painless and seamless way. I presume Charles has done all the hard work for you on that, I imagine, Brent. But Brent, I want to just ask you why this is so important to you personally.
Well, personally, you know, I grew up originally in Louisiana, and Louisiana having, as many of us know, many issues in the education system. I went to public schools, went to public universities, went to a public graduate school, before actually going to work for the United States Senate previous to Chevron. And so I grew up in the environment in public schools where classrooms were in need, and teachers, what I didn't know at the time, were funding materials out of their own pockets. You know, on average, each year teachers spend close to $485 out of his or her own pocket to put materials in the classrooms that the students then get to benefit from the learning. So for me, coming from a state where teachers don't necessarily make a lot of money, it really put into perspective to me the real needs in these classrooms and the ways that corporations like the one that I work for, being Chevron, can reinvest in classrooms where we have business operations and make a real-time difference, not only for the teachers, but I would say for the students in those classrooms. I have personally visited many of these classrooms that get funding, and when you walk in and you see the kids' eyes just light up and get so excited over simple things like math manipulatives. I never thought that first graders would get excited about math manipulatives, but when you bring these games and these exciting activities in the classroom, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
what's that?
I was saying I think kids just think they're toys, but that's fine, just so long as you don't have to tell them they're learning, they just have to learn. Charles, I want
Absolutely.
you to tell us your founding story, because I think your why for DonorsChoose is embedded in your story, your founding story?
Oh, be happy to. Thank you, Devin. Well, I was a history teacher at a high school, public high school in the Bronx for 5 years. And during my first year of teaching, my colleagues and I would spend a lot of our own money on copy paper and pencils. And we saw our students going without the materials they needed for a great education. We'd talk about books that we wanted our students to read, and a field trip we wanted to take them on, and a pair of microscopes we needed for a science experiment. And I just figured that we could use the internet to enable even folks who have just $5 to spare to be philanthropists and to support the projects that we in the teacher's lunchroom at this high school where I was teaching at would talk about all the time. And so it was with the help of my students that I created this, at the time, rudimentary website where teachers could create classroom project requests and donors could choose the project that they wanted to support and then actually hear back from the classroom they chose to help.
That's great. And is the feedback from the classroom, is that built in? Is that incorporated? Is it required? How do you create that connection and accountability?
There are 3 things that are baked into the DonorsChoose.org system. The first is we vet and validate each teacher's project request before posting it to the public site. And then when the project is funded, we don't hand out cash to the teacher. We purchase the resources and have them delivered to the classroom. So whether it's therapeutic horseback riding for disabled students or a field trip to the Science Museum of Innovation, we are purchasing that service and making sure it's there for the teacher and students. And then finally, for every project, every teacher publishes photographs of their project in action, a thank you note celebrating when their project is funded, an impact letter describing exactly what students are learning, and students even write handwritten thank you letters to donors who give $50 or more to their projects. And on top of all that, the donor can see how every dollar was spent.
It sounds like just a truly wonderful site. I can see why Chevron would be partnering with you for this program. I wonder, Brent, if you'd take just a minute before we wrap up and tell us about some of the other things that you're doing with that $140 million outside of the DonorsChoose Fuel Your School program.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we are funding a range of programs across the United States. If you think about other organizations like Project Lead the Way, that is taking engineering curriculum and embedding it into high schools across the U.S., you'll see very interesting models where in a place like Richmond, California, where we have a large refinery, we put together an engineering lab where students went every day into the engineering school and learn how to do engineering. And then we bring in organizations like Project Lead the Way to bring the curriculum with them that helps in these engineering labs. And what's really cool to see come to life is when our engineer employees in our facilities then go into these classrooms and are able to help mentor the students, bring them out into the refinery and show them in real life what a real engineer does. I think sometimes it's as basic as what does an engineer look like. I think there are a lot of misconceptions of that with young students. If you think about women in tech, we support an organization called Tech Bridge, which is basically a mentor program for girls going into engineering, where we team them up with other women Chevron engineers and help them understand the full life cycle of how women engineers are operating in companies like Chevron all over the world. And then I think broadly, organizations like DonorsChoose.org are bringing real-time classroom materials into these classrooms. So what's really cool to see is when a Project Lead the Way teacher hosts a project on DonorsChoose.org for all Project Lead the Way materials, and then we're able to come through and help fund those things through Fuel Your School. So I think making sure that the materials are there is baseline, but also building out curriculums of interest and mentoring and showing students in real life what it's like to work in a STEM field is very important, and I think Chevron has a lot of success in that space.
Well, fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I thank you both for your time today. I really commend you on the great work that you're doing and wish you every success in growing the program and seeing more schools fueled through the Chevron program. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Devin.
Now, I wonder if you would each just take 1 minute and tell us how people can get in touch with you, or who should get in touch with you? I know that there are people, Charles, who will be eager to get money through your program, and we'll want to talk about that. But also, Brent, take a minute and tell people how they can learn more about Fuel Your School and the other things you're doing.
Sure. So I think to start, most folks can follow us on Chevron.com. There is a section on education specifically that talks about all of our education programs all over the world. We also have fuelyourschool.com, which showcases the markets where the program is operating, and you can track in real time projects that are live and projects that have been funded closest to those Chevron and Texaco stations where we operate. And then obviously you can follow us on social media at Chevron Fuel Your School on Facebook, Fuel Your School on Twitter, and Fuel Your School on Instagram. And then obviously you see my Twitter handle on the page, so if you have any questions, feel free to tweet me, and I'm glad to try to get back to you.
Great. Charles?
Well, we'd encourage any teacher who's compelled by this opportunity to go to Fuel Your School site, but also to go to DonorsChoose.org to create their project, and that's where folks can pick the project that they want to give to. And at Charles Best, if you want to tweet at me, I'd love to hear from any and all of your viewers and listeners.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Devin.
All righty. Let's do some good.